So Bernie Sanders recently unveiled a comprehensive plan to end institutional racism, namely police brutality. Now, if you followed Bernie Sanders for a while like I have, you'll know that he actually already stated his support for almost all of these policies, but thankfully he's put it all up on his website to make it really easy, really concise, so that way you could just go to it and know exactly where he stands. So now he cites 4 types of institutional racism that he wants to end. So first and foremost, he discusses physical violence perpetuated by both the state and individuals. He discusses political violence, including political disenfranchisement, which is extremely important when it comes to race in the U.S. He also cites legal violence and economic violence. So I'll go over each of those 4 points. But first and foremost, I'm going to address the physical violence issue and his plan to stop that, particularly against African Americans, but also Native Americans, who are also targets of police brutality and state-sanctioned violence. Now, first and foremost, he says he wants to demilitarize police forces. He wants to increase civilian oversight of police departments and invest in community policing. He says we need police forces that reflect the diversity of our communities. He wants to establish a federal training program for police officers. He wants to federally fund and require body cameras for all police officers. The Justice Department, he says, must investigate and prosecute police officers who break the law and hold them accountable. He also wants to require police departments and the state to provide public reports of all shootings and deaths that take place while in police custody. Now, this is important because if you guys all know, there are 5 African American women in just the month of July alone that died in police custody. So he's trying to tackle that as well. He also wants to implement new rules on the allowable use of force. Police officers need to be trained to de-escalate confrontations. Now, I've been saying this all along, so I'm glad that he touched on that as well. He wants to cut funding for states and localities where excessive use of force is a problem. So we're looking at you, Ferguson. He wants to expand federal funding to crack down on the illegal activities of hate groups. Now, as you all know, the KKK, other types of white supremacist hate groups, they've become very vocal lately. And with the whole Charleston incident with the Dylan Roof shooter, we know that it's not just the state that targets African Americans. So he's really going at it from all angles, both the individual and state perspective, to stop and ameliorate violence against African Americans. So now when it comes to his second point, which is political violence, this is his plan. So he wants to re-enfranchise more than 2 million African Americans who have had their voting right taken away by a felony conviction. Now he says Congress must restore the Voting Rights Act's pre-clearance provision, which extended protections to minority voters in states where they were clearly needed. Now, as you know, in 2013, the Supreme Court stripped the Voting Rights Act of this provision and basically made it not too useful anymore. So he wants to restore that, and this is great. I'm glad he's touching on it. Now he says we must expand the act's scope so that every American, regardless of skin color or national origin, is available to vote freely. Now he says that we need to make Election Day a federal holiday to increase voters' ability to participate. This is another fantastic point. We must make early voting an option for voters who work or study and need the flexibility to vote on evenings or weekends. He says we must make no-fault absentee ballots an option for all Americans. He says every American over 18 must be registered to vote automatically so that students and working people can make their voices heard at the ballot box. He also says we must put an end to discriminatory laws and the purging of minority community names from voting rolls. A lot of people don't even know this is happening, but it's a very large problem. He says we need to make sure that there are sufficient polling places and poll workers to prevent long lines from forming at the polls anywhere. So again, really great points. So now when it comes to his third point, he wants to end legal racism and violence. So to do that, he wants to ban for-profit prisons. So that way these institutions don't have an incentive to lock people up and keep them there. So now he wants to turn back the war on drugs and eliminate mandatory minimums. Now this is huge. He wants to invest in drug courts and medical and mental health interventions for people with substance abuse problems so that they do not end up in prison. They end up in treatment. Now, this is a sane policy. If you're against this, then I don't know what to say. So now he says that we need to boost investments for programs that help people who have gone to jail rebuild their lives with education and job training. So now the fourth type of racism is economic racism and violence. Now, Bernie wants to make all public universities tuition free. He wants to invest $5.5 billion in a federally funded youth employment program. He wants to establish pay equity for women. Now, a lot of people will kind of they'll pressure Bernie for kind of perpetuating the wage gap myth. Now, it is the case that the 77-cent or 78-cent wage gap, that's a little bit misleading, but there are still studies that show that there is about a 4 to 5% gap between men and women's wages. But I mean, I think that if you establish pay equity with legislation, it's not going to be harmful. So that way, if there are even these select few cases where men make more than women due to discrimination, well, I think that we should eliminate that anyway. So that's what he wants to do, establish pay equity. He also wants to ban employment discrimination based on criminal history, which is excellent. Now, he wants to also ensure access to affordable childcare for working families. So the last set of issues, they may seem kind of not necessarily relevant to the issue of institutional racism, specifically against African Americans, but all of these issues disproportionately impact the African American community as well as Latino communities. So it absolutely makes sense that he includes this in his plan to fight these 4 types of institutional racism. Now, I think that the plan is absolutely fantastic. It's comprehensive. He doesn't gloss over the nuances, and you can really tell that he did his homework. There's been input from a lot of different people, and that this is a really comprehensive plan. So I really want to applaud Bernie Sanders for this, because institutional racism, it's so difficult. A lot of people just picture it coming in the form of police brutality and state-sanctioned violence, but really it's multifaceted. I mean, there's legal discrimination, economic discrimination. So I think that tackling it from these 4 standpoints is absolutely brilliant and really innovative, and I really hope that this challenges other candidates such as Hillary Clinton and even the Republicans to come out with a plan that's similar.